Professionally, I'm deployed at Corporation. That is where I work. But I am here today on behalf of the Durban Chamber of Commerce, who are members of the council. They requested me to coordinate part 2 of today's program. Eric, I think we're getting straight into the panel discussions, am I right? Okay, perfect. I'd like to start by very humbly and respectfully greet all my leaders who are here today. Siyabingelela kubona bonke ubuholi. Zoqala kakhulu ngokuhloniphekile umama wethu minister, ama-deputy ministers, ama-MECs, ubaba wethu mayor, u-deputy mayor, umama uspeaker, amakhansela wonke akhona, amakhosi wonke asendlunkulu akhona ngaphakathi kwethu, and all protocol observed. Umakhona osalile, usale ngephutha, akasalile intentionally. I'm also very happy to see many familiar faces in the room because eThekwini is my family. I spent 5 years in the city as an official, so very happy to see many colleagues. I've seen Stephen Middleton, Tammy, I saw Dr. Gumete, and I'm yet to see others as well. So while I'm intimidated by the program, but I'm comforted that I'm amongst my brothers and sisters. So thank you so much. I just shared from Belkudu's session 1. It really went very well. I really think the conversations are groundbreaking and they are exactly what we need. Minister, I heard you talking about the RDP and that it's based on a coordinated and a coherent development strategy. One of the things I learned from COVID is that as we are busy with the KZN economic recovery strategy, it is very clear that we need all hands on deck. We need all stakeholders to work together, be they from the community, public sector, or private sector, to work together, driving a common agenda of helping us to revive our economy from the ashes of the pandemic. If you look at some key economic indicators, for example, you'll see the numbers from Stats SA that the GDP plunged by 51%. We lost just in excess of 2 million jobs as a result of this pandemic. And you see also that apart from the jobs that have been lost, there are so many people who have become completely discouraged in terms of going out to look for employment. And there's also pressure in terms of the fiscus on the social support and the grants that are needed to help our communities pivot from this pandemic. That is why I was very interested to hear the minister speak about unscrambling the omelette. And I think what I'm going to do next is exactly that. I'm going to introduce the panelists whom are really dealing with the issue of reimagining eThekwini.
Deputy Mayor must do the speech first.
Okay, thank you. So before we get, thank you, Eric. Before we get to the panelists, whom I'm going to introduce briefly, I'm going to ask you, Deputy Mayor, and just officially open this segment for us, please, if you don't mind. Tell us, Belinda, a big round of applause, please. This is our Deputy Mayor of eThekwini Municipality. Simnike Hlombe, azofika stage, singakhathali, silishaya singakhathali. Are you ready for DDM in eThekwini? Ni ready? Ubuzile uMinisi uthi, are you ready now for DDM? Ma, over to you.
Thank you, Program Director. It's wonderful, as I've already said, to have the Minister, the Honourable Minister here, the Deputy Ministers, the MECs, His Worship the Mayor and my EXCO, as well as all business leaders, members of the media, ladies and gentlemen, all protocol observed. It gives me great pleasure to welcome you to this session as we chart a new growth path for our city, working in collaboration with all spheres of government and social partners through the district development model. The DDM presents us with a great opportunity to streamline our planning and implementation processes by removing the disruptive pattern of working in silos. It is precisely for this reason that we believe the groundbreaking intervention will go a long way towards improving the capacity of local government, which is at the coalface of service delivery, and retail trade, as well as sophisticated financial sector, which includes real estate, business process outsourcing, and the banking industry. Of course, as a city and as a province, we are all very concerned about the devastating impact that COVID-19 has had, not just on the economy of eThekwini, but for both the province and the entire country. And people, it's not just the formal business group that has been affected by this, it is also informal traders that are now part of our growing unemployed and destitute. So we have to look at new ways of contesting this terrain for economic growth and recovery. And I think that the Mayor and both the Minister have spoken about the impact of COVID, so I'm not going to cover that issue, but we are looking at a new way of doing business. It's going to take a long while, and I don't actually the same again as a country and globally. And while we work tirelessly to address the economic consequences of COVID, we've also begun to look ahead to a new inclusive growth path, which is aimed at addressing the structural challenges that constrain our current development potential. Firstly, we need to create spatial justice by dismantling the apartheid city and fostering integration and unleash the economic opportunities for the poor and the marginalized. In doing this, we first need to ensure our core economic assets are working well. This includes the port and logistics platform, the inner city, the existing industrial areas, as well as the growing Northern Development Corridor, which includes the Dubai Trade Port and Cornubia. At the same time, we need to rapidly grow investment in township nodes and corridors in a manner which ensures maximum benefit and ownership for township residents. The implementation of catalytic projects that we are facilitating will enable us to achieve these objectives. Secondly, in order to grow a strong local economy, we need to foster industrialization and the growth of key sectors. eThekwini is a leading employer in the country in sectors such as clothing, textiles, leather and footwear, the ocean economy, logistics, paper and pulp, plastics, chemicals, and automotive and components, as well as agro-processing. A lot of work is being done to ensure that we take full advantage of economic opportunities related to the ocean, as well as our dams. Thirdly, considerable emphasis has been placed on improving the local business environment. The gravitation towards online systems and the adoption of simpler and quicker processes will cut down red tape, which strangles entrepreneurs and their ability to grow, making government more accessible to its citizens. Fourthly, eThekwini is rich with heritage and a culture of celebration, sports and leisure. This is one of our strengths, and we need to leverage on this by growing the tourism as well as cultural and creative industries. I sent a text to our head of ECOD last night, and we both were overjoyed with the President's announcement, which really could restore our tourism industry, not to back where it was, but hopefully, of course, adhering to COVID protocols. Finally, we aim on building economic inclusion by growing the social and solidarity economy. The city is working with the provincial government to implement the Radical Agrarian Socio-Economic Transformation Program, which is focused on creating a viable agricultural sector among rural communities. Honourable Minister, as South Africans, we have had many plans before, and communities are tired of hearing about grand plans. What they want to see is action that brings about meaningful change. We have no doubt that the district development model will help us achieve this for a better life for all. I thank you.
Thank you so much, Madam Deputy Mayor. Ngicela simphinde ngehlombe elikhulu bakwethu. Siyabonga, ma'am. The theme for our session today is around reimagining eThekwini. Is eThekwini ready for DDM? I would like to introduce our panelists who will assist us engage with this topic. First up, in no particular order, is Mr. Yusuf Patel, who is a professional development planner with vast experience across the public and private sectors where he's undertaken large-scale transformative projects. Can we please give him a big round of applause? Welcome, Yusuf. Then we have Neville Markey, who's been at Trade and Investment KZN for 16 years, currently the Chief Executive Officer of Trade and Investment KZN, our provincial investment promotion agency under the Department of Economic Development, Environmental Affairs and Tourism. A warm round of applause to Neville. Next up is Mr. Philip Sitole, who needs no introduction. He's the Deputy City Manager for Economic Development and Planning Cluster at eThekwini Municipality. Jobe, welcome. Ms. Bernadette Kumalo, Imbogodo, Siyabonga, who's represented with panel. Bernadette has served in the SAPOA, the South African Property Owners Association, and is also currently the CEO over the last 5 years of a property development company called Rockwill, and she has a range of experience from the corporate banking sector as well, having served at the likes of Itala, Standard Bank, and other banks as well. Let's give Ms. Kumalo a big round of applause, please. And lastly, Mr. Moshe Motlihi, who's from Transnet, a seasoned professional and an expert in the field of transport, logistics, and maritime. He's been practicing in the sector over the last 30 years and has done quite a few projects within the Transnet stable we look for and the UTC Graduate School of Business. Panelists, welcome. You are going to speak from your chairs. We can give them another hand, no problem. Panelists, you are going to address us from your chairs. I just want you to test that your microphones do work. You don't need to come to the podium. Just test that your microphones do work. And I'm going to start, give us the lead presentation to cover the topic for today. Do you want to come up here? Because it's on the screen, by all means, come through. Let's give Mr. Patel a big round of applause, please. Over to you.
It's almost afternoon, so I'll say good morning, good afternoon to everyone. Honorable Minister, Minister, Deputy Minister, MEC, Mayor, I think all the leadership officials, greetings to you. My current role as well is supporting the department at national level on the DDM. So basically what I'll just share with you is really reinforcing direction around the DDM. But we're trying to assist to see maybe how, at a more technical level, we can make sure that we're able to implement the DDM as successfully as possible. So this is a really exciting process. I'd really like to thank everyone for the invitation. And I'm sure we're going to be able to emerge out of these discussions with a greater focus and more clarity in terms of what needs to be done. I'll just quickly indicate, just to provide some sort of context. So I think the benefits of the model is really, it's to say that we must be able to start doing things differently. It's an opportunity to look at coming up with bold ideas, new models of how we can implement better and more effectively. But it's also about how we start embedding these relationships and intergovernmental relationships into our system, and we find a more programmatic way of actually doing things. It's also about being more strategic, thinking thinking in more strategic ways, but finding solutions. And this can only be done through collaborative processes. You know, if we sit in our own, whether it's in our own offices or departments or in one particular sphere, it's not going to be easy to actually find solutions. Solutions can only come through collaborative work, and that's why the district development model is beginning to talk about and beginning to implement the approach of joint planning, because it's not just about coordinating, but through joint planning we can actually find innovative ways of resolving issues. But the district development model is also about accelerating implementation and looking at, there's a range of immediate priorities that need to be acted on immediately. There's a range of stabilization actions that we need to focus on, but also to find intergovernmental problems that have been in the system for a long time. And I know over the years, you often find municipalities either trying to find national departments or entities to come and collaborate and work with them to resolve things. You often find maybe national departments or provinces, doing things or parachuting programs into areas, etc. So I think and for that reason, we find also many projects, important projects sitting maybe even in the IDPs, in the integrated development plans, and sometimes those projects are sitting in the IDPs for, in fact, many years or even over many cycles. But those are the kind of things I think we need to give immediate priority attention to, and the district development model has to assist with that. I think the broad context is just to indicate that the district development model is also about leading us to success as a country. So it's not just about what particular spheres or stakeholders are doing, but how collectively this will actually enable a strategic country approach to our different spaces. And I think in the context of today's discussion, we need to look at the issue of reimagining eThekwini as a national priority. What does eThekwini mean for the national economy and even beyond? The critical thing is that each of these spaces, I think in the end of the day, we need to get the best out of each of our 52 district and metropolitan spaces. And that when we're talking of the economic positioning of each of these spaces, it's really about saying how, when each of these spaces come together, how it can actually contribute to greater success in terms of the national economy. Because when we talk of the economy of the country, it really actually is the combination of all these different local spaces, because the economy happens in every locality across the country. And I think when we're talking of creating conducive conditions at a local level, it becomes absolutely critical for that and for us to succeed on that. So it's the issue of the model, and I think if we're having this discussion around what are the key things that we need to start focusing on in the context of eThekwini, we'll have to begin to look at accountability of each individual. So I know there has been this question of saying the district model is now saying about everybody working together, but then we may not be focusing on the performance and accountability of individual entities and spheres. So performance and accountability of individual departments, entities, municipalities remains absolutely critical, and doing those core functions remain absolutely critical. But the issue is that has to be combined with this intergovernmental approach to enable us to improve things. This is just indicating the shift from this approach of alignment, where I think we've got a lot of plans. In fact, we may even be asking a question, if you look at some of our plans, we may be asking, why are we even having this conversation of reimagining eThekwini? If you look at some of the plans, they seem perfect, it's all aligned. It's talking to the National Development Plan. I think a lot of the things that we say in the plans, some of the right things are all there, but it's the issue of how it all comes together and how it's actually focused in a way of it being resourced and looking at a kind of rigorous approach to actually making sure it gets implemented. So the shift towards a joint planning approach so that we take what is in our different plans. Some things don't need to be redone. I think in terms of if we look at our spatial development frameworks, local economic development strategies, growth strategies, we want to begin to take all of that and begin to synthesize it and get to the crux of what is the critical issues, what do we actually agree on to implement, that we need to implement jointly, and firm it up. So when we begin to talk of a one plan, it's really about, for the first time, actually everybody pulling those priorities into one plan that gets signed off and then is able to get resourced accordingly. So that's just the broad DDM context. But when we talking of then reimagining eThekwini, the district development model is really focused on a set of goals and outcomes, and there's a lot of detail around that. There's comprehensive guidelines, etc., that have been developed. But not to go into all the detail, but just to indicate pillars that the DDM impact is people development, transformation of the economy, and ensuring that we have sustainable functional places, right? And then infrastructure and services become fundamental and crucial to those sustainable and functional places. And governance sits at the center of all of this, because without governance and good management, none of these sort of outcomes can become possible. So I think this is really just a context to say, if we're reimagining eThekwini, how do we bring all of this together? How do we bring the people, the economy, and the places together in an integrated way, so that in the end of the day, it's working for everyone. We're not just doing economic growth and development, but we're leaving the people out, or we're not doing fancy infrastructure and doing all of that, but it's not helping to build, sustain the economy or assist with the impact on people. But the critical thing with the district development model is that we now begin to institutionalize integrated planning, budgeting, and implementation that begins to talk to these outcomes. So we can begin to also move beyond looking at our business plans and project outputs. So sometimes we have the deliverables in terms of outputs, whether it's building houses, for example. We're focusing and we're chasing some of those targets, but we're not actually looking at building sustainable neighborhoods and functional places and communities. So this integrated budgeting approach, it's not just about bringing everything into one plan, into one budget as a budget framework, but it's also about saying, okay, how are we spending, or how are we looking to spend those budgets in a more outcomes and impact-focused way. We may ask ourselves, and I think we need to be clear that there is, we've heard from all the presentations and inputs, and there's already, critical. I think the base and eThekwini itself is already, I think, quite far down the line in terms of, being positioned for faster and more inclusive growth and development. But and I think this reimagining, it's not, I don't think there's going to be solutions coming from one place, but the idea is that as we're going through this process, and especially from now till March, when we look at pulling together this one plan, this reimagining would have to be really part of that process, but it needs to be grounded and built on I think some of these critical pillars. It has to be about fundamentally and radically changing conditions of poverty, inequality, and unemployment. So we have to find and not just look at these issues in the same ways we've been looking at them, and not respond to them also in the same ways. We're actually going to need to go down to the fundamental root causes of things, what's actually driving things, understand those drivers, and be able to come up with responses and look at things in a more systemic way as well. I think it is about positioning the economy as really a national asset for higher growth and development. And then, making eThekwini really an attractive place, I think a premier destination for investment and for tourism. So almost this has to be the fundamental driving point. It's based on the work that has already been done, extensive work as part of the DDM process in terms of the profiling, etc. And we, in the earlier sessions, so not to repeat some of these things, but I think the important point is what's emerging is this dualism in the economy and in society, and the divides, be it urban, rural, divides between different areas, the levels of poverty, etc. Those I think are actually crucial things to say as we're reimagining eThekwini and we're reimagining the economy. How are we going to make sure that we bridge some of those critical issues? I think eThekwini is also, we can see as it sits as a critical space within the country and in the national context. So it's a significant contributor to economic growth, and I think the approach to intergovernmental relations has to start shifting and changing, be it from all sides, whether it's from local government side, national government side. I think we need to start looking at these spaces as national assets and how we can all collectively come together to get the best out of them. I think if you look at what emerges out of the profile, etc., we could look at, and the idea is that we just begin to look at sharpening the diagnostics around some of the issues and being able to be clear about what are some of the strengths, some of the challenges, opportunities, and even the threats, and become clear about actual interventions and mitigating actions to ensure that we address some of this. And I think the context also, the Minister has already laid some of the context and direction, I think, in terms of also where some of this reimagining could move towards. So I'm not going to repeat and go through some of the detail, but what would be critical is that even through the planning process now, is that we're able to actually lift these things out and really look at some of the detail with a bit of rigor. Again, crucial in terms of what the Minister also covered, but the issue around the endowments and looking at competitive advantage in it, etc., are actually quite crucial. I think there's also some of the issues and challenges we're clear about. Some of the actions, I think, or directions, broad directions, I think we're already quite clear about in this. So this reimagining process is I think we're on quite a good pathway already. What it really means is that we're able to find leverage points and points by which we can actually firm up commitments and move towards implementation around some of these issues. So the implementation, the packaging packaging of strategic projects, tying in and firming up intergovernmental commitments around some of these areas will actually be quite crucial. So in terms of, there's a broad set related to people, place, economy, and goals and outcomes in terms of the DDM guidelines and framework, which you know, there's a lot of unpacking we can do around that. But the critical thing is that if we're looking at eThekwini and repositioning and look at the economic repositioning of eThekwini within this kind of national context and role, you know, these are become the four critical things that we can then begin to unpack. The competitive economic advantage, the key economic sectors, self-sustaining communities. So I think we've spoken about social solidarity economy, and it's exactly about that. So I think even if we look at some of the catalytic projects, etc., we need to just ask whether it's talking to and how is it addressing this dualism in the economy. So some aspects are talking to you know, the more formalized economy, but we need to begin to look at the support that needs to be built within communities and within the more informal sectors. And this issue of the leakage from the local economies, I think it's a big problem that we're facing, but we need to begin to quantify this. So there's a lot of growth in it that happens, but if you look at the benefits of that growth, it often leaves these areas. So even within the metro, it leaves communities, but also a lot of leakage outside, moving out of the metro. So for me, I think if we talk of this strategic positioning and look at eThekwini as this national asset, it's really about building eThekwini as this export hub of South Africa. This should be its strategic positioning within the national economy. And I think it's a matter of saying, what are all the things that we need to pull together to make sure this happens? So the expansion of the port needs to be addressed. There's immediate issues around decongestion, etc., but we need a more longer-term expansion plan around the port. Linked to the port expansion needs to be the expansion of manufacturing within the area, and then the issue of linkages within the country, so that there's a lot of other municipalities that are impacted because the port is not necessarily functioning or we don't have sufficient capacity. So I know, for example, in the Steve Tshwete municipality in Mpumalanga, they actually trying to ramp up to look at stainless steel exporting. But one of the constraints for them is actually the congestion in the Durban port. So you can see how eThekwini as a national asset, you know, really that becomes a strategic issue for the country. And I think that's where we need to really begin to get things right. I think there's already been a whole range of issues and discussions, and even a lot of plans within the city. I mean, the city has done a lot of studies on the economy and different sectors, etc. It's really just to begin to look at how these things begin to get packaged around the strategic competitive advantage. So when we say what will eThekwini be known for, you know, there's going to be a whole range of things that we know the city will be known for. But what's that defining kind of advantage will be this export hub, and then linked into that would be some of these leading sectors and key sectors that need to link into that, and then a whole range of things that need to happen around unlocking and growing these sectors, I think in a much more kind of robust way, but also looking at the value chains more clearly in terms of SMME development, bringing communities and community production, sustainable livelihood processes into the sector, into the formal sectors. And then I think I'm almost done. The other critical outcome I think that we would need to maybe look at is around how do we actually activate the self-sustaining communities. So issues of local production of goods and services in the communities, in the areas where communities are, how can that be supported and activated? And you know, things like supporting SMMEs and microfinance support, etc., will actually become quite crucial. So if we look at, again, it's got to talk to the three issues of people, places, and economy. So maybe just then, in conclusion, I think is really to say that there's a lot of ingredients in place in terms of what can happen. I think a collective reimagining with all the stakeholders and the three spheres of government, I think we'll be able to, you know, to get us into a much more effective mode of doing this. But it's got to be about a mission-directed approach with a world focus, unlocking things, and ensuring that there's a focus on implementation. The integrated planning, budgeting, and implementation has to underlie all of this so that we're finding an institutionalized way of doing this. You know, it really can't be about at meetings or at workshops we're trying to resolve things. It's got to be about how does it become part of the work method of all the different departments and entities, and how that can come together. So there's a programmatic and institutionalized way, and I think that's what the DDM is trying to bring to this, so that a lot of this becomes, because it's fine if unless we actually, and that's how our system of government actually works, we've got a government planning, budgeting cycle, etc. So unless things formally feed back into that and get tied into our government planning and budgeting cycle, these things will always just remain, you know, visions and dreams. But we need to then see how we actually make sure we embed it. And I think then the one plan becomes a critical opportunity. It's not necessarily a new plan, but it's actually bringing planning and governance together, because the one plan will almost be this intergovernmental protocol that's signed off. So all the critical things that and the kind of misalignments or burning issues that we're wanting resolved, we need to find how we get it locked into the one plan, which then through the localization, spatialization processes and budgeting processes of different entities can actually become then a reality in terms of implementation. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Sorry, I can't hear myself. Thank you so much, Yusuf, for that. I think you hit the nail on the head. You know, the strategy is there, the plan is there. What is critical is implementation and also monitoring that we are performing according to the goals and the targets that we have set. So if you look at it from a municipal perspective, Mr. Mayor, I think it talks to a scorecard at a municipal level, down to the most junior of all employees, to know what is expected in terms of them to deliver on the targets of the municipality. Last year, in October, the President was here in Durban, where he launched the DDM model. And one of the issues, in fact, what he did, he also engaged, a minister will remember, he also engaged with business stakeholders. Many of them, in fact, raised a number of issues around port efficiencies. As you know, that Durban is home to the busiest port on the African continent, and KZN also being home through Richards Bay to the deepest airport on the African continent. Business representatives said they were concerned about congestions at the port and would like to understand what the plans are, in fact, to decongest and create more efficiencies around the port. Moshe, I'm going to ask you to start, and as part of the district development model, what is the latest in terms of port processes and efficiencies around the port, so that the port is also able to promote not only the economic recovery strategy that we are on now, but from a long-term perspective, the port, to your point, Yusuf, is a major economic asset for our country, especially for our province as KZN. Moshe, can you just speak to us about that? Over to you.
Thank you very much. Greetings, ministers, deputy ministers, mayor, and colleagues head the traditional leadership. Without really wasting time, from the day when, after the visit that the minister had last year, subsequent to that, we were visited by the shareholder minister, Minister Godan, where a meeting was convened through the spirit of DDM. Local government, the city hosted the meeting. It had the provincial government, it had representatives from national government, DPE, DOT, and the departments relevant in the province, including economic development. We had the business chamber, we had shipping lines, we had labor colleagues, we had everybody who had something to do with the port who was interested. Marching orders were clear on the 18th of November last year that you leave this room, go and form an all-inclusive team that will, have one perspective on issues, agree on challenges, and come up with one single program that seeks to address this. We immediately took the task. We set up what we call the Durban Decongestion Team, which, for my sins, is chaired by me. We then agreed that this committee is going to meet every second week, where progress will be monitored at that frequency, 14 days. We then looked at the problem as it was articulated. From getting close to the problem, really, we zoomed it down to 8 key areas. Those areas started from issues that were coming outside of state organs, where there were behavioral issues from how industry was interacting with the port, how they were organized. For example, we had noted that everyone wanted to work or come to the port during normal business hours, Monday to Friday, from 7 o'clock or 8 to 5 or 6. Therefore, this was causing problems. The port is working 24/7. We also had noted that from those who are owning transport, there were issues that they had that were not really complying with how they ought to conduct themselves. So we identified a few issues that related to private sector. We came to state-owned companies. We identified efficiency issues, manning issues, and a few others. The third issue was around infrastructure. Then we found that framework really to accommodate all of us, business, private sector, state, to have something to do. We came up with 8 streams. The first one was to have this multi-party team, which is working. I'm happy to say the way it has been working, we now have provincial government of Gauteng having sent representatives to the decongestion team. We've got NAMSA, which is the National Association of Automobiles, South Africa participating. This is the reach that it has had. We have had higher institutions of learning being part of this, also assisting in terms of problem solving and research capabilities. We have that running. Secondly, we looked at the behavioral issues. One, we really all agreed that it cannot be that there is no coordination and synchronized way of approaching the port. We rolled out the booking system. It was not an easy journey because it meant the culture is changing. Before the booking system, people would come to the port as we do to the taxi rank. You don't book at the taxi rank, you just go, hope the taxi is there, wait for it to be full, then you go. But at the airport, we all know. You make your booking, you know what time your flight is, what time you have to check in so that there's order. So we have established a booking system. Not easy, but now it is entrenched in few areas. The Port of Durban, because of its size, it is a microcosm of the port. It's got 5 distinct businesses that are running, one being containers, the biggest, second being Island View for liquid petroleum. Those 2 were the hot spots when it came to congestion. We decided to attack them. I'm happy to say we have dealt with issues, the long and short of it, in terms of queues to the container terminal and Island View. I need also to really say thank you to private companies such as the fruit terminal in Durban. They had extra land that they were not using outside of the port. They had let the Island View trucks to use that land, but at a price. And again, it points that the port can be a value driver if it is working well, because now they are earning extra income for the land that they were not using. To deal with this, we put the 24-hour booking system. Everyone coming there knows what is the installed capacity. If you want to come between 10 and 12, you can see on the system if you've got slots or not. That has assisted. The third area was to put a stream on behavioral issues of truck drivers. This is lagging behind because, one, we wanted to register. Who are these truck drivers? Are they here really being law-abiding citizens? There's been noises, right or wrongly, around saying there are many non-South Africans in that business. From where we're sitting, we wanted to have this record so that we can assist the law enforcement and security cluster to understand who's coming to our facility, so that if there is anything, we know what is happening in Mozambique, where there are issues that are challenging the security environment. We want to have that, and also know that you do not have criminals coming close to the port. So we have not made enough progress here, and we are still urging the truck owners to let their people be registered. We intend using that database and link it to Home Affairs and Department of Labor so that we can really know that all of us, we can account who has come to our institutions. That is lagging behind, but we're working on it. The third area was to find state-owned land in and around the port where we could let the drivers to rest and get, if you like, a humane environment. Because some of them are driving all the way from DRC. Certainly they need to rest, they need ablution facilities. There's none available around the port, but we have now broadened our horizon. We have met potential partners in Cato Ridge. We have engaged 2 property developers who really are coming up with a solution that we think is going to revolutionize the environment and how we treat the drivers. And we then see this, we're discussing with them. Maybe they can talk more about it, but we want it to be a setup that will bring dignity of the truck drivers back, dignity of the mothers who are cooking and selling food, because as things stand, you find mothers who diligently, every day, they go and sell food in an unorganized environment, which is very unsafe. But we then say, you can set them up there and let them really start benefiting from the offshoots of the port. So we having that coming. The fourth one was really to work with the Metro Police and SAEPS. I want to commend them. I see you, Steve, seated at the back. They have grabbed the challenge with both hands. Law enforcement has improved around the port. They are the first one, they've got their own chat group where they see areas of problem, they really communicate. And that has brought back dignity, and they are clamping on the vehicles that are not supposed to be on the road. The fifth one was around saying, how do you reduce the number of trucks on the road anyway? Because just having all these fancy things does not address the damage that the trucks are causing on our national infrastructure. We have spoken to our sister division to increase the supply of trains to the port. We have seen at the peak of congestion that Island View, when they were receiving grain, there were a number of trucks coming in and there were few trains. But since the intervention, we have been able to increase the number of trains deployed to that precinct from 1 train a week to 4 trains. The target is to get to 7. So we have made progress. Same thing for Maidenhof. In fact, Program Director will note that at the peak of COVID, there were 3 cargo categories that did not feel the negative impact of COVID. One of them was the grain export, citrus export, and minerals. And those, you would see them on the road, trucks coming to the port. But since the train has come in, it has augmented that intervention. And we really are grateful that we're beginning to work together, but we see opportunities. The 6th one was to look at the efficiencies now and say you can do all these things. But what His Excellency the Mayor was talking about people not doing what they ought to do. We also have realized that few things were done. We realized that from management point of view, we did not support the teams by buying equipment at the right time. We made commitment last year. I'm happy to say the pieces of equipment that we said were going to be delivered early this year have ultimately arrived. Yes, we lost 3 months due to COVID, but they are all in operation. We are now waiting for the second batch. We are working with our employees through labor unions as well to make sure that their morale is brought up. When the president was here, minister, issues of performance and reward system were raised. That has been sorted out. Number of shortage of teams. We have since employed more people, but I need to mention that with the restrictions from COVID of over 60 people like myself who are diabetic, we don't have them at work. So the number that we have injected has been slightly reduced, but certainly we're better than we were before. Things stand, we sanitize that. The challenge that we have, you still see remnants of congestion. It's not going to container, it's going to Maidenhof, which is the second precinct. This is where now we're looking at Caterage to say, unlock this for us, because we've got trucks that are in Maidenhof that need to have a home. We also are proud to announce that areas where we wanted the city to assist us with, we reported 2 weeks ago the deproclamation. Mr. Mayor, we received the feedback. There's in principle approval, few things that we need to sort out. We're making progress. So we really are getting where we want to be. All these interventions, we're doing them as a way of stopping the free fall that was happening. The last one really was to say, how do you institutionalize the best practice? That we have done by adopting the Lean Six Sigma methodology, where we took 2 history of each 2-year history of equipment and say, how has this piece of equipment behaved? At what point is it breaking? What is causing the failures? That information now we're putting it back to supply chain to say, you know that component A fails after 4 weeks. Start your procurement process now. We are in that way just saving our money, not tying our money onto spares that are not required, but also limiting downtime due to this. So we really are doing well. Lastly, we communicate frequently. Every week, I pen out a weekly bulletin just to give feedback so that we can keep everyone kind of on the same wavelength. Noting that a multi-party conversation, nobody gets what he wants 100% because they've got competing interests. But I'm comfortable to say everyone has got a little bit of inconvenience, but in the whole, we are moving forward. The next big thing that we're going to do is to repurpose how the Port of Durban is being used for. Principles 1, stuff that does not have to be in the port, that can be done elsewhere. We want to encourage that to be done there, like packaging and other stuff. Then you can then release the port for cargo that has to be handled. In that way, we hope that we will release capacity in the port and reclaim the position that the Port of Durban had. We used to be number 1 in the continent. We're now number 3. 2 ports in North Africa have overtaken us. simply by putting excess capacity. Now we've identified areas where we're going to do this repurposing. We did share the idea with the president, and we're getting good feedback, and we think we are reclaiming our spot because where we are located, from a shipping perspective, we are the cheapest. If you're looking at the cost, you don't pay passing through South African waters as you would elsewhere, paying for the locks and bridges. So we really are excited, and the future looks great. We want to link the economies. South-South trade has to work. Integration between the BRICS countries has to work. And in setting up these inland facilities, we want to unlock value that should be accrued from the free trade that the minister was talking about. That has just been signed. What are we doing to link the region and also to help with the infrastructure development? And we hope that private sector parties will be taking these opportunities, because ours is to be the value creator. Then they should take the opportunities. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Moshekte. Thank you very much for that. I'm happy that you are looking at the competitors who have obviously taken over our #1 spot. And I think what is required there is to bring back those benchmark outcomes so that we know in what areas we are falling short as a region and how we may need to improve. I'm also noticing quite an interesting trend, Honourable Minister, of people in all the presentations I've listened to, that we know that the success of the DDM really hinges on people being on board with this model. So that's quite an interesting aspect, that we not only just focus on the technical issues, but on the soft side of issues, which are just as critical for the success. The economic strategy of eThekwini really hinges around the port, eThekwini being a port city. I just want to bring in Mr. Philip Sitole just to give us your inputs in terms of the oceans economy as a key strategy in your broader economic development and economic growth framework, and also your reaction to some of the work that has been done at the port since the engagement of October last year. Jobe, over to you.
Okay, thank you, Program Director, and good afternoon to the leadership and all protocols observed. As Moshe was saying, there is a team from eThekwini that is working with the port in unlocking the potential of the port in as far as all the approvals that the port might require from the city. So there is a team which is led by the head of economic development and also by the chief strategy officer of the municipality. So it is at the very highest level. The second issue is around issues of crime. As Moshe has indicated, the city is fully involved in terms of trying to reduce crime around the port, which is an issue that was also raised by the Durban Chamber of Commerce and Industry, I think a year ago. So I think there is that partnership that is there in terms of dealing with logistical issues. But over and above that, we're also working with the port in terms of the parcels of land that Moshe was referring to. So then this speaks to partnerships, that you cannot resolve things if there are no partnerships, and the port is within the city. Now, Moshe is more interested in making the port to be efficient, and trucks must come in on time and leave on time, and his business must be viable. Now, in the presentation that was done by yourself earlier on, spoke about the place. And our view as the city is that the port is in a particular place, and that place is eThekwini. And the intervention from eThekwini which has been, I mean, we have had some challenges, and we are battling, and we need support in unlocking this because it's an opportunity. So, eThekwini as a place, our view from economic development is that the port must be able to help us to give opportunities or to provide job opportunities to the locals. We understand that some of the skills might be skills that are outside of the city, skills that we might not have. And the minister spoke about the importance of skills. So that is the first area, is how do we work with the port in ensuring that the locals benefit. If there is going to be further developments, I'm talking about capital and infrastructural developments at the port going forward. So the city needs to come up with a plan. In fact, we've got an agency within the city, which is called eThekwini Municipal Agency. It's a skills agency within the municipality. For medium to long-term capital investments at the port, our intention is to create a partnership with the port where we'll identify young people that will be trained and be skilled so that they're able to ascertain or to get those job opportunities. Over and above that, there's been an outcry, and Moshe is aware of this, of local black-owned businesses, Africans in particular, that have got a port that is not working for them in terms of opportunities. So we need to come up with programs. So we don't have those programs now on empowering local businesses who are interested in the port operations. So it's one area that we need to engage more on. The last point for me in relation to the port is the fact that as a city we've got sectors that we are clusters, we call them clusters, responsible for various sectors. So there is a cluster that is called Maritime Cluster. And part of the work that is done by the Maritime Cluster, it involves various industry players in the maritime space. So part of the work that that cluster is doing, it's also around skilling, it's also around assisting small businesses so that they are able to provide goods and services required in the maritime space. Lastly is to engage with players and encourage them to buy products and services that are produced by these small businesses. So in short, what I'm saying is that the city is looking at the issue of easing the access to the port and making the port to be efficient, logistics issues. We play our role as far as we can there. But the main issue for us is how do we translate the economy of the port to benefit to benefit local communities, more especially the young people, because that's where the opportunity is.
Are you satisfied that the level of engagement at a structural level is producing the right results?
Well, the results are not.
And what more needs to be done?
Well, I think the immediate issue now is how do we make the port work? I think that's where the port management is focusing on. And that's the message that the president got in terms of the last meeting. So I'm glad that there are now movements, because we must make it work. So I'm happy that the city, the province, and the port, through the teams that have been established, there is movement on that score. But whether I'm happy in terms of the opportunities, I think there is still room for engagement and improvement on that. And we require maybe part of my submission here when it comes to that, because we've got limited resources within the city. So we need the other spheres of government, that will be the province and national government, to support our agency that deals with skills development in terms of resources, budget in in particular. So I know that economic development is packaging projects that we will be submitting to the city and the other two spheres of government for support. And this speaks to what the mayor has created, the war room on skills, on job creation and skills development. Because there is now a war room that is focusing on that, and the port through Moshe will be represented in that committee that has been created.
And I think if you are an economic, or even if you are not an economic active person in eThekwini, the issues of the port really are important to all of us. Before Moshe leaves, Moshe has a television interview to go to. I like this because as agents of change in the province of KZN and the city of eThekwini, we want to make sure that the work that you are doing is also, known beyond our borders as a way of promoting the good work that is being done. So we're happy, sir, that you'll be participating in that interview. We will release you at the right time. I'm just apologizing for you in advance. I just want to open the floor before Moshe leaves for the TV interview. If anyone wants to make any input to the program of creating efficiencies around the Port of Durban, can I just see maybe by a show of hands if anyone has, even if it's not a question, it can be, input that you think the colleagues have not considered, and I believe that feedback can come from the ground up and really assist us to solve some of our problems. Can I just see by a show of hands if there's anyone at all? There are microphones circulating in the room. If anyone at all wants to make an input or ask a question, this is a discussion forum. It should be a two-way process. I'm just looking around and the colleagues will assist me in case I miss. I see a minister would like to say something. Mr. Applegreen, can we please render the microphone to the minister? And if there's any other hand, you can also just assist me, colleagues, by noting that hand for us. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you very much. First, I want to appreciate the work that has been done in trying to decongest the port, because it was really a big issue and we were going to lose the customers for the port. But I want to ask, how much are we leveraging on technology to also improve the port? Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Over to you. Thank you. Deputy Minister. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you very much, Program Director, and thank you very much for the progress on the work that has been done. I just wanted to tag in on the work around the issue of the Municipal Skills Agency and the issue of the skills that the port needs. And I wanted to find out the relationship and the working together with the institutions of higher learning that are based here in Durban or in eThekwini.
Thank you. Thank you, Deputy Minister. I will allow my colleague Moshe to deal with those questions. I have not seen any other hands, so I will take it that those will be the two questions we will address. Over to you, my brother.
Thank you very much. I just want to, just before I respond to the feedback from the Minister and the Deputy Minister, say thank you very much for the encouragement. On the 23rd of November, we're setting up a webinar where we want again to engage people who want to understand how to access opportunities in the port. What is the process to be followed? We can't arrange a meeting like this, but we are engaging all these groupings that are around and the chamber so that we can get a wide participation and talk to people through. We have issues that I think are beyond us in some cases. The issue of set aside is something that is being contested. More so when it comes to an institution like the port. The phenomena in Durban that we all need to find a way of dealing with it. A group will come and say, the port is in my ward, therefore I should be the one who gets to be appointed. The other one says, but it's not my fault that I'm coming from Enanda. I'm also a Durbanite. The other one says, because I'm in Pietermaritzburg, do you mean that I cannot get anything? So it's a conversation around how do we define local, more so when it comes to national institutions such as Transnet, and deal with issues of set-aside youth and them. But before this was clarified, we had done progressive things, I think. There's an activity called hull cleaning in the port, where the ships that are coming are being cleaned for debris that they catch as they sail through. We went out to say we want young people, young black people. I'm proud to say we have them being employed in there. That was before we were told, hey, set aside is an issue. We're sitting in that space. So we also, Minister, wanted to encourage government to challenge the 51% ruling or against 51%, because at this port, every time when we're releasing land to tenants, we would then say minimum of 51% black ownership. The driver was really to say, people who were previously disadvantaged do not have all the money, the barriers to entry are high. But if you put the 51%, you force the one with money to go and find a partner so that we can build this country together and have the working together. That is a serious setback to us. We really would want to see that being checked, its correctness, because it's got implication to those tenders that we declined and issued based on our interpretation of what has to happen. So we are going to have this conversation to talk around this, because the issue now of saying, what am I getting, has potential of fueling people to come and disrupt. As I'm sitting here, some groupings sent me a 5 days notice. If you do not allow us to go and get a share from another black-owned business, by force, we are going to come and disrupt the port. So we need to have a conversation that will then say, how do we really unlock value? And we want to use that session on the 23rd to also unpack the value chain of the port, because it's not always or only the few things that we see at face value. There are a number of input activities that people may not be aware of, so that everyone can then say, where do I want to participate in this chain? But we really are standing ready to improve and to be better and to be, in fact, one of our functions in the Port Act says we must be the change agent. We must work with state and drive transformation, and we want to have that conversation. On technology, we have already moved some way into it. When it comes to interface with customers, we've got similar technology as other countries beyond our borders. However, there are new terrains that have been opened, more so around the traffic management. It's something that we then say, whoever who would be running the facility in Cato Ridge and us and customers, we must then say who's gonna be owning that leveraging of technology. We have seen that climate change is impacting our business in a negative way. We need, one, yes, we've got information from CSIR to predict the wind, but in 2017, when we had that storm, none of us saw it coming. We need to improve. The equipment that we're using has to be robust to deal with high winds, because the climate change is real. So we're looking at that and say, what else can we do? In fact, on the meetings that I'm chairing every 2 weeks, I've put out a challenge to the Deputy Minister's question to higher institutions, say, help us here to find technology or intervention that can mitigate against wind. I said, go give this to students and say, what else can we put that can mitigate against wind? There could be wind deflectors or something, but we really are working with them. MU, Mangosuthu University of Technology, TUT, we work with them. Some of our courses that we do in-house, for them to complete, they need to go in there. Moses Kotane Institute, they are part of the stakeholders that we meet with. We have given them an assignment to go and research. We really want to improve. We have our own school as well, Maritime School of Excellence, which one day when you have time, you'll come and see at the port, which is customized to our own consumption, but we're also using the same school to train fellow Africans around maritime. But it's something that we'll never exhaust. We want to get going. Thank you.
Thank you very very much, Musha, for that. I'm going to change tact a bit and move on to another topic of great interest to all of us in this room. This is the issue of catalytic projects in the city. The President, when he addressed the joint sitting of Parliament, he spoke of infrastructure and said infrastructure development presents huge potential for us as a country to stimulate economic growth and also create jobs. I just want to get a view from the CEO of Trade and Investment, KZN, in terms of the current institutional arrangements that are in place and are enabling us to effectively drive catalytic projects, both that are landing here from a national perspective and those that are from a regional perspective. Over to you, sir.
Thank you. Just to acknowledge the Minister, Deputy Ministers, Mayor, MECs, Deputy Mayor, and all leadership that are here. I think as a precursor to my response to your question, Chair, just to acknowledge the message that the President announced yesterday, that we are moving from relief to recovery. And that would require all hands on deck to realize additional investments into our country. Just now, to respond to your question, I'm going to deal with it in two fronts. One is to deal with the institutional arrangements that have assisted in facilitating and moving some of the catalytic projects. And then I'll also deal with the challenges associated with that. There's a model that we have actually partnered with eThekwini on in moving one big catalytic project that was really stuck. And that project involved not only eThekwini, but it involved national government departments and different departments for that matter. It's a project out in Cato Ridge, where through a collaboration between ourselves as the provincial agency for the attraction of investments, as well as the eThekwini municipality through the partnership of the Economic Development Wing, and in particular with the support of the COO, Mr. Mbele, where we co-chair a team that specifically has been divided into different work streams. And the work streams deal with the roads, deals with environmental compliance, deals with any other regulatory compliance that may actually impact on the project. What we have learned is a lot of the projects move only because of the willingness and the commitment by the relevant structures that you're engaging. First of all, the support from the Ports Authority, in particular Mr. Matlohi, within that project has also been quite tremendous in moving the project. The reason I'm articulating this is because we've had to specifically pull a team together to focus on ensuring that a project which ordinarily, if it were to run on its own, it'll probably take it 10 years for it to achieve its desired results purely because it's got to go to different doors. Whereas when you pull together one team, and then each branch of the teams specifically focus on their core deliverables. So if we're dealing with the road interchange leading to the project, then you bring in SANRAL, then you bring in the Department of Transport, both national and provincial, and they all know what they need to do. Then you bring eThekwini Transport. Everyone knows what they're supposed to do in order to ensure that we support and facilitate a project. That is now at a big anchor level. Now, within that, then you have other projects. I was highlighting that one as it's still work in progress, but as a success story that once you have all the institutions of government working together, we can actually deliver a lot. I'll give you a second success story. During the 2018 Presidential Investment Conference, there was a project announced for the manufacturing of cell phones in South Africa. No location was announced. Post that announcement, some of us followed up on that project to find out if a location had been identified. The investor indicated to myself that nothing had been identified. To cut the long story short, we impressed upon the investor to come and look at Dube Trade Port. The investor came, had a look. He called me on a Friday evening to say, tomorrow morning I'm landing on a Saturday. Can you guys show me the facility? You know, so the team at Dube pulled all stops, pulled everyone together. We met with the team. Our premier made himself available to meet with the investor as well. All hands on deck. In 1 year, we managed to pull that project from literally scratch to completion. So the presidential conference ended in October. It was in October. And October, the following year, the president came to launch the project. So
I think that deserves a big round of applause. Honestly, I think so. Well done.
So once you have all hands on deck, then you can realize a lot of movement. And it didn't have challenges. It had challenges to lead to the finalization of the project. But the team really, again, comprised this eThekwini municipality. Really, they put their hands on deck. The team, again, from economic development, the city leadership, provincial government, national government, everyone put their hands on deck to say, right, it's a positive project, let's see how we can move the project. That's now on the positive side. Now, let's deal with the challenges. The challenges are, and for a lack of a better word, I'm going to try my isiZulu. Sizoti, sifuna ukubulala ama silos. This whole issue of a silo mentality, where you have some of our colleagues, some of our officials, who will tell you, when you bring in an application, if I don't have document 5, I send you back. Client brings it back with document 5. You say, oh, but you're now missing document 12. Okay, you send the client back. It takes the client maybe a month to get to document 12. They come back again. And then the official says, oh, okay, now you're missing document 20. And then you ask yourself, but when client came the first time, couldn't you just say you're missing 5 documents? And these are the documents, so that when client brings the application back, those 5 documents are dealt with. So we still have that huge challenge of some of our colleagues that actually sit on this. Number 2, where we have projects, especially, one thing I've got to commend how our president has led the whole investment drive has been, and if you recall, the message driven by the president in 2018 was, we are now wanting to see the investment strike diminishing. And the only way to see the investment strike diminishing is to see local companies reinvesting in South Africa. And that reinvestment effectively will be far quicker than the recruitment of new investors. The average life cycle of recruiting a new investor into a country or a specific location, minimum 3 years. But an existing company, studies show 70% of the time, within a year, they can turn around a decision and actually expand their operation, increase jobs. So we've seen a huge uptake of local investors in projects. But then once we then deal with the local investors, then we have other challenges that, again, Mr. Matlohi mentioned. Then you have those illegals, site invaders, who will then come in. Local company has already procured and given the work to a black-owned company. But then you have others who come in and claim a stake from the very same black company and say, you will give me at a ransom. So those are some of the other challenges that we experience in moving projects and realizing the commitment of those projects. Now, Chair, your question is institutional framework. The institutional framework of dealing with lawlessness is important. And it's important that the lawlessness is curbed as quickly as possible, because we're going to find ourselves with large-scale projects, government-led and private sector-led, that are stifled because of lawlessness. That still remains a huge challenge for converting and turning investors around. Number two is where you find some of our national government and some provincial and municipal structures. Again, where you have an official who has been there, but the official is not dedicated to progress in realizing job creation for our people. Where the official will tell himself, if I have no benefit as an individual, this project is not going to move. And that's the other problem that we've got to deal with. If we don't deal with that element of officials that specifically deal with, if I don't get anything for myself, I'm not going to support the project. On the flip side, the private sector that influence also to say, I will give you something for this project to move. And this is the message that I continue to communicate to the private sector as well. Yesterday we had a session in Ilembe, where it's the same message that with property developers, I'm saying to them, yourselves as property developers, you fight amongst yourselves. And you try and you continue to push the brown envelope so that your project can get approved, even though you find that it does not comply. So those are some of the challenges, in as much as we've had good positives that are there, we also have challenges that impact on ensuring that we realize projects and those projects move as quickly as possible. Finally, my parting shots are, it's possible to convert projects quickly if there's all-round commitment and willingness, without silo mentality, without lawlessness, and without stifling because I want something for myself. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Neville. I want to bring you in, Job, here again, so that we can get a view from the city as far as the catalytic projects are concerned, because, they land here, and how have you as the city managed to drive these projects and also maybe meet the deadlines that have been set for these projects, as well as the actual deliverables that have been stated for the various projects. Over to you, Jobe.
Okay, thanks, Program Director. Firstly, let me concur with Neville on what he has said. But maybe in terms of eThekwini, we do have a department or a unit called Catalytic Projects, and I'm going to do this through some presentation, because I feel that the minister and deputy ministers, they must understand what is meant by eThekwini when we talk about catalytic projects. Catalytic projects for us, these are large-scale spatial transformation projects that we implement in partnership with private sector. So it's any project for us that is more than 500 million rand in terms of investment. And some of these projects will require bulk infrastructure from the municipality. Now, Minister and DMs, the issue here is that eThekwini municipality has been providing bulk infrastructure to some of the catalytic projects, but it's very expensive for the city to do that. It's one of the challenges that I think the DDM will be supposed to help us with. It's the issue of infrastructure funding. Because the presentation that was done by yourself, we kept on saying eThekwini as part of the national, eThekwini contributing to the national. And our view is that national must assist us to achieve these projects. And these are multi-billion rand projects. So financing for bulk infrastructure is also very critical. And if we can get help from the province and up to the national, government. We hear of funding available at national level, but as a city, I don't know, if you are at eThekwini and we are approaching national, at times it looks as if we are not from within the country. The support given to Joburg and Cape Town, it is not as easy when it's supposed to come to Durban. So we need to get a slice on the bulk infrastructure funding so that we are able to fund some of the infrastructure required by some of the catalytic projects. So the other issue is around why do we support it? Because that's a question. We support them because we want to see transformation in the economy. We support them because we want to increase our rate base. So earlier on, when the mayor was presenting and all other presentation talked about the municipalities being able to sustain themselves. Obviously, currently, we can't sustain ourselves with the rate base that we have because challenges are far bigger than what we have. So we need major investments to come in so that we can increase our rate base. So some of the projects that we are assisting is because it's going to help us to transform the economy, to deal with the issue of spatial development, spatial issues, bringing people closer to work, and thirdly, to deal with the rate base, and also deal with township and rural economy. I think when the minister was presenting, spoke about metros helping neighboring municipalities, so districts. So I think the approach there is the regional economy approach. So when we support some of the catalytic projects, we look at whether the project is going to be able to achieve exactly what the minister was talking about. So if we're talking about eNtshongweni, so our understanding is that eNtshongweni will help eThekwini to increase its rate base, but eNtshongweni will also be a link between eThekwini and Pietermaritzburg. So it supports both economies. Then, how are we structured? Because I think I need to touch on that very quickly, Program Director. We've got program managers and project managers, and we are creating a one-stop shop. So the mayor last week, 2 weeks back, had a mayoral lekgotla, and we did almost the similar presentation. But what came out from that presentation was that the city, the economic development, the Catalytic Projects unit within economic development is not fully resourced. So it's dealing with projects that are worth billions of rands with 4 program managers. And through the intervention of the mayor, we are happy to report, Mayor, that by Monday we would have been able to get project managers. I'm not sure about the number, but there will be more than 4 project managers. And these are project managers within the municipality. In the last meeting of the deputy city managers meeting shared by the CFO and the city manager, there was also an agreement that there were certain specialized skills that were supposed to be transferred. And we're hoping that before the end of this month, that would have been achieved. So lastly, I think the point here, Program Director, is that in as much as we had this problem of lack of capacity, but we have been able to, if we can go to the slide that talks about what has been achieved, we have been able to facilitate a lot of projects, a lot of catalytic projects from at least in the last 5 years. And those projects, the investment value of those projects was 16.1 billion rand with those limited resources and almost no assistance from national government in terms of infrastructure development. So we're able to attract the investments that are worth more than 16.6 billion with a revenue to the city and the number of jobs as indicated there, which is 7,500. Now there are catalytic projects that we're implementing now, which they are at the value of 132 billion rand, and jobs, these are over a period of 15 years. these particular projects. And jobs to be created to be around 340,000 jobs. But for us to be able to achieve this, we require a lot of assistance in terms of the province as well as national government. And some of the assistance that we require is what Neville spoke about, it's speed and efficiencies. At times you submit, you facilitate an application and get submitted to national for a WOLA license, and it takes years. Or if you're lucky, it will take months. But normally it takes years, and this frustrates investors, and they think it's a Tewini that is not being able to fast track the process. So I'm not going to go through all of what is covered in this presentation, but my parting shot is that we believe that DDM is going to help us to unlock some of the bottlenecks which are within the government process. Thank you.
No, kezwakala. Siyabonga. Kezwakala, Jobe. Before we take questions from the floor and input, maybe let's ask Ms. Benedette, my sister, if you can just talk about the role of the property development industry, and I'm also interested in black-owned property development firms, if they are playing any role in the catalytic projects in the city. What have been your experiences? What are the challenges, gaps? Are there any successes that we want to duplicate in other areas as well? Over to you. And also maybe speak a bit about the DDM and how you believe as sector practitioners you are poised to play a role in the program.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon to the Minister, the DM, the Mayor, all protocol observed. And thank you to be invited to the session as the private sector, because I'd like to believe as the private sector we are quite Team SA, and to us what's important is we've got the capital to invest in the catalytic project, and I'll just like to mention that our company is one of the companies that has done the catalytic project over the years, and it's called Keystone, and with its collaboration with the municipality that has worked quite well. But I would just also like to raise some issues as well that we have faced. What we find is for private investors, what's more important for us is obviously, as I said, is cash flow and feasibility. And I'd like to mention Toyota, for instance. Toyota has been in the talks for around 12 years. But because of a disconnect between provincial, national, and the municipality, that capital investment has gone back to Japan and has come back again to South Africa, and that has still not yet happened, which was going to address a lot of interventions that the government has, which is employment, as well as economic recovery, as well as a whole lot of black industrialists. So what I'm trying to say is, as a private sector, the time that it takes for decisions to be made highly affect and impact project feasibilities. Another thing that I'd like to just maybe touch on, as you said, on the catalytic project, you mentioned there's 276 billion Rand worth of catalytic project just in KZN alone. And in our own, where I'm the CEO, in Keystone alone, we've done 4 billion over 5 years, and there's a lot more that we in the planning phases. However, if you look at the catalytic team, which is led by George, Philip, and Shannon, who are amazing officials and Antipiso, and who are highly qualified. However, to me, they're like post office officials, because if you're not given any powers to make any decisions there, how are you to manage 276 billion Rand and deal with such investments in the area? So I think those are the things that we need to look at, and what the private sector is asking for within the government, if I could touch also on Mushe, the Port Authority. I know a lot of people are looking at the port congestion, but I experienced it myself at Keystone. We've got 80,000 containers, and then within Keystone alone, the interchange was upgraded by Senral, but the road, we as the private sector at Keystone invested 500 million of our own funding from the bank to put bulk infrastructure, which Jobe was saying that the municipality doesn't have the bulk infrastructure because we wanted to expand the rate base. However, the road leading all the trucks to the industrial park, which has revitalized that whole rural and township economy, has not been upgraded for the last 2 years. And I always sit here and I'm in fear that MR 385 one day will have a fatality, a major fatality there. So those are all the things that we need to start looking at. And I think as the private sector, and speaking of the private sector and the commercial property developers, what we need the government to look at is the rate base, a conducive environment for development. And on the port side of things is, Mushe is a regulator, but a regulator without power. So all we need is a framework for Mushe to be able to work on, and I know a number of private sectors that are willing to address a number of issues that the port has and create a number of black industrialists and economic recovery. Thank you.
So just to help us drive DDM, are there formal engagements between yourselves as an industry and the city?
Oh yes, you know, if I'm wearing not the CEO hat, I also wear the SAPOA hat. I have numerous engagements. That's why I said within the city there's pockets of excellence. As I mentioned, the ECOT department, which is led by Jobe, the Catalytic Project, which is led by George. Those are pockets of excellence where there's Russell, Shannon. They are amazing people. However, within those pockets of excellence, they don't have enough power to make any decisions. That's why I call them post-net, because then they still need to go to other departments and ask for authority from those departments, which doesn't help us as private developers. And remember, as private developers, we also deal with the listed funds who I know want to invest so much more money in Durban. However, if you're dealing with the post-net, so why bother?
Okay, I'm going to try and move towards closing, and Yusuf, I'm going to ask you to give us your reflections. But before we do that, Jobe, maybe just your parting shot around your overall industrialization efforts, you know, to drive sector master plans, and what are those key sectors for us as a city, and maybe just reflect on those plans very briefly, just maybe under a minute.
Okay, no, thank you. Yeah, no, I think it's time is against us, but I have a lot to say. Maybe if the team can put a slide here on tourism, because it's one of the sectors that the minister spoke about, where I would like to say a few words. So, what Benedette is talking about, it's something that we have acknowledged as the city, and that's why I referred to the meeting that the mayor was the mayor called a few weeks back, and one of the decisions there was to empower the Catalytic Projects office. And that's why I'm speaking about these project managers that are going to come in, because some of them, they've got skills that Catalytic Projects office didn't have. For example, we didn't have architects within the office. We didn't have people who are dealing with real estate. We didn't have people who are dealing with legal issues. And we didn't have, we have program managers, but we didn't have project managers that are working with program managers in complex projects, because these projects are complex. So now what we, the decision that has been taken is that before the end of this month, all these skills must be made available. So that came from the meeting we had of senior managers. In fact, we are going back on Monday to report on how far we have gone in resourcing the office. Coming to one of the sectors that the minister spoke about, which was tourism. The tourism, the numbers that the minister was talking about earlier on, that when she was here last year, the numbers for tourism were going down, domestic tourism. So the numbers, minister, have been going down, I mean steadily going down nationally in terms of domestic tourism, in as far as major destinations are concerned. But in I think it was 2018, where the number of domestic visitors to Durban, it drastically went down. And part of that was how the numbers gets calculated by Stats SA as well as South African tourism. So there are certain pockets of places that are within Durban that are not being identified as Durban. For example, if you talk about Vale of Thousand Hills, Umhlanga, they don't regard it as part of Durban. So then the numbers will be skewed from the National Tourism Office, because there's a huge number of people that come to Durban, but they go to Umhlanga. So they don't get recorded. I'm not trying to come up with a defensive mechanism, but I am saying numbers, I agree, numbers were going down, but that was one of the factors. But what are we selling? Because the issue here is, what are we selling to local tourists and also to international tourists? What we have been selling for years, from apartheid up to maybe before the World Cup, we were selling destinations that were Africa, right? You'd never talk about rural areas. We were not talking about townships. Now we have to repackage. We have to repackage Durban. Now our new package, it involves the entire eThekwini with all offerings that we have within eThekwini. Some of the offerings, they respond to the local market. Some of the offerings, they respond to the national market. Now, in terms of domestic, I'm not going to go into details on what are these offerings. But I want to share the number of where people within South Africa, where are they coming from in as far as tourism is concerned. The 31% of our visitors, 38% is coming from within the province. And then 31% of our visitors, it comes from Gauteng. Now our strategy, our international marketing strategy, we then identified Gauteng as a country. It's a province, but to us it's like a country, because it gives you big numbers. 1, 2, it also gives you big spenders. Now we have to package your destination in such a way that it responds to this number, because if you market your destination properly into this particular source market, which is Gauteng, that will give you even more numbers, and the numbers of people that can spend money in the city of Durban. Surprisingly, through research, we were thinking that maybe about 5% of people are coming from the Western Cape, when it's 11%. So Western Cape is number 3. And that's, again, there you've got people who are big spenders. Without undermining provinces, there are provinces like the Eastern Cape. You know, it's a good source market for Durban, but their spending power is not as big as Gauteng or Western Cape.
Please try and wrap, Chobe.
Yeah, so what we are now doing in terms of the international tourism, because the minister spoke about how do we use international platforms. So some of these international platforms, I mean, you need to have big resources. Now, again, when it comes to national departments, South African tourism spends much more money on Cape Town and Kruger. I mean, it's a fact. And very little on KZN and almost nothing in Durban. So that's one of the issues that would make other provinces to look as if they are doing well compared to Durban KZN. It's because they get good support from South African tourism, and they know this. And that's a problem. And I think we need to get assistance through DDM in making sure that, firstly, the Department of Tourism at national level, it prioritizes Durban. We become part of the priorities. And South African tourism, in its marketing efforts, it considers Durban. So Durban, it only uses its own budget to pay for international marketing and also to deal with domestic tourism. So without province and national government, our budgets, it's very limited. And the parting shot,
A real parting shot this time.
yes. It's the issue of the weather forecast.
Yes,
Yeah.
the minister spoke about that.
Yes,
Yes,
because the minister is for the third time now in my presence she's talking about this weather forecast. We did a research on how these cities, they appear on this weather forecast. Almost all of them, they don't pay for it. So these international platforms, your CNN, BBC, they on their own, they've got their own criteria that they use to identify cities that they are going to place in their news and also weather forecast. So the city of Durban, in terms of that criteria, it has not been identified, and we have made a plea. There are other cities that are appearing there, and they pay for it. And the amounts that they pay is huge amounts to appear there. So we need to get a reasonable budget to market the destination, both in terms of investments, because we have to market the destination for investments. We have to also market the destination for tourists to come here, and we must pay dollars to do that at an international level.
yeah.
So we need help from national.
You've put the matter on the table. Minister is here. She has heard you, and that DDM will also support this initiative. Can I just give, before you, Yusuf, my brother, just Neville, just a parting shot, just a half a minute.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. I think a lot has been covered, but I think the plea really is for, the reality is projects happen on the ground, and with the DDM model, it'll really create the framework for monitoring the implementation of those projects. I think from my side, DDM Projects War Room, chaired by the city leadership, and once a quarter overseen by the minister and DMs to see the implementation of those projects and where the bottlenecks are. Because sometimes you find that some of the bottlenecks remain at a national government level and they require just a bit of a nudge. So you find that mayors' hands are a little bit tied because it requires national to agree and to move. And sometimes you find that it's a department or a state institution nationally that is holding back on that decision. And just by achieving that decision within a month, we'll realize R1 billion project appearing and jobs being created. So I think that would be really from my parting shots in terms of assisting us to achieve the desired results of creating jobs. The last thing is we speak a lot about township and rural economies, but underpinning that is the informal economy, because even within the city there's an informal economy. Within the township, there's an informal economy. In a rural area, there's an informal economy. How do we transition the informal economy towards the formalized economy, and that informal economy leading it towards manufacturing opportunities? I think that is also quite critical. Thank you.
Can I just say that, Can I just say that, Mr. Mayor, I like that suggestion of the DDM, what did you call it, quarterly session where we all come and account in terms of what war room, in terms of what it is that we're doing. And I think it's a multi-stakeholder platform that we will all support. And I think, Jobe, that we didn't touch on the informal economy, the rural and township, due to time constraints, but I think it then lends itself at that platform, and we follow up on how DDM is supporting those initiatives. I like that, but Mayor, I think it's a brilliant proposal. Yusuf, can you just maybe wrap for us, my brother, your reflections? Sorry, Sis B, are you covered? Did you want to say something? Just parting short. Go for it, my sister. Half a minute.
No. All I just want to say to the minister is, as the private sector, this is the word from the private sector, the property sector, we have the capital. All we need from the minister is bold decision-making, give us the framework and the guidelines to work, and let us do our business so that we can do economic recovery, have black industrialists, and also create a lot of employment, and I mean in the next 6 months. And the discussions could be held in a forum outside of this, because these are plans that are there. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Sis B. Okay, Yusuf, if you can just then your final remarks.
Okay, thanks, Program Director. And I think there's been a lot of issues actually raised in this discussion. It's been really, I think, an important discussion. The idea really is that we have to look at how all these issues get properly packaged within a very organized framework, which the DDM is bringing, because we have to have a practical way of actually taking all of these issues and actually making sure that they get addressed. So the one plan process is exactly about that, because it will make sure that because it's all about prioritization now, and we've previously had different perspectives on issues. You have national government has a particular perspective on an issue or sees it in a particular way. The city may see something in a particular way. And I think the opportunity now is to be able to make sure that we have an intergovernmental shared understanding of these issues and a common vision of how we're going to be dealing with the issues and addressing them. So from here, I think we'll have to have a series of follow-ups in terms of looking at how these issues get packaged into the DDM implementation. The thing around investment, and I mean, the city is doing some, really excellent work, and also in terms of the catalytic projects, etc. The reality is that there is a competition for investment across the country. We're sitting with the current, impact of the pandemic, etc. So it's making things even more acute. The problem is, even more challenging. And I think that's why it's going to even mean that we're going to need to work even harder to try and look at issues around fund mobilization, etc. But we have to link it into, government has announced the economic recovery plan. Infrastructure investment is a big driver for that. Within that program, I think there is now a look at how we can look at funding infrastructure differently, because we're not going to be able to do it from out of public funds. The numbers we're talking of here, billions of investment, and we've got to look at how we're doing it across the country. What it will mean is that we're going to need to look at different models. I think already in the presidency, we're beginning to look at the blended financing. We're looking at public-private funding models, setting up, special purpose vehicles, etc. So those kind of arrangements, we will have to look at how that can be brought into assisting. I think the other important point is there needs to be a proper land development framework, both with regard to rural land development, as well as in urban development, that within that framework we're able to, to actually make sure how these partnership models can unlock things so that there's better the project pipelines are actually set up in a more appropriate way, and there's better project packaging that then takes place. I know there's also big issues around unlocking rural land in the area, and we have to begin to look at the modalities, but some of the thing that's been pioneered in infrastructure investment, I think we'll also be able to assist, and we'll have to take some of those discussions forward. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you so much, Yusuf. I'd like to, in fact, thank each and every one of you for your time and your preparation for this conversation. Gosh, we're just running out of time. There's so much to speak about, but I'm happy, Mayor, that the Minister has come to sort of spark us off, and I think we as the locals must now continue with the conversations. Thank you so much, Ma'am, for just coming and getting us to be revved up again as far as DDM is concerned. I think our commitment... Yes, our commitment is to make sure that we continue with the work that has been started. Just to do a formal wrap for the day, we're asking Honourable Minister to make her final remarks. Thank you. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you. I thought you were going to do the final wrap. I was just going to make an input. I know we don't have time, but if you will allow me, I think there are issues that need to be sorted out nationally. This thing of just being able to register a company. You know, if you go to Rwanda today, you can register your company online, and when you arrive there, you go to an office, there's somebody from the municipality, there's somebody from the vet office, there's somebody from the environment, there's somebody from, and you do everything there. When you get out, you have your license. A small country like Rwanda does that. And then if you want to import some machinery, you go to an office, you sign your form, and a young man there says to you, or a woman says to you, okay, I'm sorry, we can't be to you on the spot, but please send your driver at 4 o'clock this afternoon. And they give you your importing license in 2 weeks. Your machinery or whatever you want to import is there. Why can't we do that? So I think we need to have this conversation and really try and get at a national level to have a system where people don't struggle to register. But I also think we should, because this DDM, the reason eThekwini is a pilot is that we have to learn, we have to experiment, we have to be practical. So I think the next stage, the champion can all the necessary know, but the next stage, I think before the next lekgutlas, whether it's government lekgutla in January, before the next lekgutlas, we must have, whether virtual or physical, it doesn't matter. We must have a meeting with all these different ministers. There's infrastructure, there's human settlement in the earlier conversation, there's trade and industry, there's all sorts, I won't mention all of them, but tourism. We need to have this kind of conversation with those departments so that we try and unlock things. The one plan will come when it comes, but when we unlock these things, the one plan would be easier than if they are still unlocked. So we need to have those conversations with all of them so that we then come up with a plan of how do we then make sure that we unlock all these things. But at the same time, you had the cell phone company. What you did there, why can't you do with other companies yourselves? because you have a benchmark that you can actually, if you all come together. The Premier can call any minister. Now that they are champions, the champions will be there. They can call anyone. So let's just be practical now and say this is needed. Who do we call? Champions, we need this department, we need that department to come on board, and let's just work like that. Because we are a pilot, we are learning, everybody has to learn from us. If we work as business as usual, then we're not a pilot. If we're a pilot, we must try and get new ways of doing things, try and force new ways of implementing things. The presidential bulk infrastructure went to OR. They were in Port St. John's yesterday looking at infrastructure, but I think we need to have a conversation with them also to understand some of the things, because I think they may also be looking at things differently, but I think we need to talk to them. But what we are saying is very exciting. What we have planned is very exciting, but it's for all of us now to try and unlock the bottlenecks that we are experiencing and to encourage tourism to also look at Durban. But there's also one thing that in tourism, especially if you are now moving away from just the apartheid tourism, but you know, a lot of tourists from the, I see you don't include the African continent. You had domestic, you had France, you had what. 60% of external tourists come from the continent, not from those countries. So if we are to improve our tourism, we must also look at the continent. Now, the continent are big spenders because when they come, they stay in hotels or whatever. They buy things that they would have bought in Paris because our shops have them here. They will buy, they will go with extra baggage going back home. The UK that we are putting there is fine, but they come on British Airways. They stay with Keith and Kin. They don't even stay in hotels. They don't buy anything. Why would they buy from Woolworths? They have their Marks and Spencer in London and so on. So I'm not saying you mustn't target them, but they are not big spenders. Probably the Eastern Cape might be spending more than they do. The Germans, of course, are big spenders, but we can talk about tourism. Remember, I was foreign affairs, so that's why I know a bit about tourism. But I'm just saying, some of the things that people always complain about is that they come to South Africa. They want to experience South Africa in its totality. But they'll ask you for a restaurant that sells indigenous food. Where is it here in Durban? Or wherever. These are some of the things that people want to experience. But we somehow seem to be shy about our food. When you go to Nigeria, you'll get Nigerian food in a big hotel. You'll get pepper soup in the Hilton, yes. You'll get their indigenous food, because when you want to also know what do people eat, taste what they eat. But here, I think we've been so brainwashed about how bad we are, how backward we are, that we feel shy about our food. We'll rather take them to a place sells French food, okay, but they'll get better French food in France. So I'm just saying that I'm glad that you are saying we are repackaging, but those are some of the things we can add. Because we don't have time, I would have had a lot to say, but because we don't have time, I think we must aim at having another meeting, maybe virtually, with the other departments to discuss these things. And I accept the proposal that every 3 months, because we are a pilot, we can't do it with all other districts. But because we are a pilot, the 3 pilots we must make sure that we pay very special attention to. And so we agree that every 3 months we must look at what the progress is. Can have half a day, not a long time, just half a day. What are the bottlenecks? What needs to be unlocked and so on? What's the progress? And what's happening in terms of investors, and can we do more? So I accept that, but I will also be led by the champions here who are breathing, thinking when it comes to DDM at eThekwini. I have to breathe, think 52, but the 2, it's eThekwini and nothing else. So they are here, please make use of them. They are very hardworking, they run, they talk, they are not the type of deputy ministers who keep quiet in meetings. So if you give them, they will, and if they need my assistance, I'm here as well. So let's just work together now. Practically, let's move. Thank you, but thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Minister, for your leadership and your inspiration. To thank the Deputy Ministers, our Mayor, our EXCO, our Chief Whip, and our leadership, and to all the officials that really helped put together today's session, the staff of the ICC, and the young lady who was cleaning the podium here. She's getting experience in how to do intergovernmental relations. She's our intern, and so she's not just a wipe or a sanitizer. So we'd like to say thank you to all of you, and lunch will be served shortly. Mr. May, did you want to say something, Mr. May?
Definitely.
Let her just wipe.
No, thank you very much. Definitely, I want to say something. I requested Deputy Mayor to cover up on some activities that are supposed to be taken through by the city. So she will be running a meeting of our command team, which will take place at 2 o'clock. So we wish to thank the Minister for spending your time with us. We know how busy your schedule is, but you dedicated this time because you have passion and love for what you are doing. So I'll request the House to join me in giving a big round of applause to our Minister. Our activists, our deputy ministers, we were lucky as eThekwini to be deployed with these 2 activist deputy ministers. I think we are lucky, and we are going to take advantage of that. But they are always here, they attend all meetings, even the command team meetings. Let's give them another big round of applause for their dedication. Our provincial champion, Ubabu Mshengu, the Youth League, and the energetic champion, but he just vacated. So we wish also to thank him because he's always here for us, even when we deal with our planning and everything for the city. So he always avails himself. Can we also give him a big round of applause? Definitely we are going to take advantage of all our champions, their activists. They will be able to assist us in many aspects. Let me also thank our panelists. Thank you very much, Mnyambose, for steering this ship in a correct way, and all our panelists and their contributions to the issues of economy of our city. It's highly commendable. And indeed, this session was insightful, and it has empowered all of us. So when we leave this room, we'll be the different people like when we arrived before. So let's give them a big round of applause for that. We have a firm belief that our war room is not going to be a silver bullet in everything, but our war room intends to bring all stakeholders together. Even the building that will be constructing here at Central Park, we also want to create a space for this one-stop shop to find expression in real terms, so that all departments, especially those who are dealing, authorities who are dealing with water, use licenses or EIAs, they are also housed so that they start contributing. We do not call them from somewhere, but they are part and parcel of this metro to unlock things and make business easy in our city. And we are hoping for the better in that regard, that people will be with us. But the time for talking is no more. There is time for implementation. So let's talk, more implementation. We've been talking, we've been planning, we've been dealing with everything. So suffering from the execution deficit must become the thing of the past. Here we are, we must act and act now. But those who think that they are not energetic to move with the pace that you want to move with, there's no crime if you request that, can I stand aside? So that those people who want to see things happening can make things happen. I think that is the approach we'll be looking forward. Thank you very much to all of you participants. Amakhosi asendlunkulu siyabonga kakhulu ngesikhathi amakhosi asendlunkulu aspendile lapha, siyazi ukuthi kukhothame inkosi abanye bekumele beyingale ekhaya kwakukhabazela, kodwa nikwazile ukuthola isikhathi sokuthi nifike ngapha. Siyabonga kakhulu amakhosi asendlunkulu. Sibonga kakhulu ku-Interfaith Group, business people who are part and parcel, our structures, community structures and stakeholders, NGOs, NPOs who are present, our officials. Thank you very much. Ningadino nangelinye ilanga kuyothi manibizwa nje nisabele ngoba lo msebenzi udinga thina sonke ukuze uqhubeke. So ke usuzo announce ke babu Eric ukuthi makusuka la kudlula ngasekhaya kanjani. But we want to announce that the minister will be back here on Monday to meet with the business sector. We'll be using these very same facilities to talk to issues that affects investment and businesses as well. And after that, there will be visitations conducted by the minister to various sites around the city on catalytic projects that will be happening on that day. Thank you very much. Once again, let me request you to give yourself, as participants, a big round of applause. Siyabonga kakhulu. Waza ke baba Eric usho ukuthi makusuka la kudlula kanjani ngasekhaya.
No, that's it now. Thank you, Your Worship. Ladies and gentlemen, just to say that lunch is served in the rooms to the left of my left and your right, and lunch is served, and thank you very much for your attention. And our leadership, can you please leave first to the holding room that we had earlier? Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for your attention.